Oh, we are live, and this is our closing session. Well, welcome everyone. It's been 4 days, wow, and we have two amazing people who you're going to get to listen to. They are closing our session, Chip Conley and David Hornik. I will definitely introduce them in a bit, but I just wanted to take the time here and thank everyone. So while everyone is still getting here, we love to start on time. So I'm going to get going. Welcome everyone. Today is day 4, the last day of our Kids&Art Foundation AHI 2020 Virtual Summit fundraiser. And upcoming, as I said, is our very last speaker session of the event. If you were with us all the 4 days, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time with us. If you bought art and or donated, thank you very much for your support. If you're curious, we still have art that was created by our patients and siblings available for sale, as well as artwork from celebrated professional artists, along with a few very specially commissioned pieces for the theme of a conference, Ahi, the fish. If you're new to us and you're joining us for the first time today, again, I welcome you. I'm Purvi Shah. I'm the founder of Kids&Art Foundation. I'm also mother of a 3-year-old who was diagnosed with cancer in 2005 and fought through a relapse when he was 6 years old and needed a bone marrow transplant when he was 8 years old because of all the chemo that was pumped inside him, because of all the drugs that were supposed to make his cancer go away. And unfortunately, my amazing Ame passed away on September 25, 2011, after fighting cancer for 6 of his 9 years with us. For Ame, art, music, reading, writing, yes, he was a prolific writer, as well as science were integral. He loved science. He knew the periodic table. The 9-year-old knew the periodic table by heart, knew exactly what came after what, and he would test his doctors randomly. As soon as they entered his room, or if he was going in for a procedure and needed anesthesia, he would grill the doctors to the point that the doctors knew that if they were going to Ame, they'd better have a cheat sheet. Ame loved everything that this conference stands for. He loved conversations. He could talk about anything. He could question you, he would make you think, and he would challenge you. He was a very witty child, always observing. Conversations about improving quality of care. Why did we spend 4 days on this topic? Because when I was a parent, a cancer caregiver, spending days, weeks, months in and out of the hospital, I saw a lot. I felt a lot. I gave up a lot. I missed out on a lot. And that was the same for my entire family. But what kept us going, the glue, the hope, the silver lining, that one thing that helped us put one foot in front of the other was creative arts, was being impromptu when there was constant chaos around us. What kept us outwardly normal was going inside and having conversations with ourselves in whatever format made sense for us. We created a world we could sparklify and hide within. We also took the keyboard to Ame's room when he had his transplant. We knew that in the bone marrow transplant unit, we were alone, completely alone from the world. Nobody could come in and nobody could leave. The music kept him going and kept us going as well. The art we created, the origami that we hung from the ceiling above his hospital bed, the walls that we covered with art that we all created, choosing the colors, the laughter, the mess, the beauty that came from the chaos is what we kept with us because we couldn't fathom what was going on around us. 55 days in a bone marrow transplant unit. Only the creative arts helped us keep going. And that is exactly why conversations about improving quality of care. How do we make sure we reach every each and every child that is fighting cancer or any life threatening illness? How do we make sure the creative arts is there for every sibling who is a silent warrior? And how do we make sure the creative arts is there for that bereaved family who doesn't know how to make sense of the fact that they don't have to go back to the hospital anymore? No treatment, no lugging things around, no child. And how do you make sure for the survivor who's lived through cancer and suddenly finds him or herself free to be normal, or in high school or college and looks around themselves and sees that nobody has war wounds, nobody's been through their life, nobody knows what they have been through? We have to give them tools whereby they can create their own little world through spoken word, drawing, painting, music, theater, any form of creative arts that speaks to them, that gives them the wings, that tells them it's okay to be different, that celebrates what they have gone through, instead of trying to suddenly welcome and fit them into a normal life and hurriedly trying to minimize what they have been through. These are the reasons for our conference. These are the reasons why we need to emphasize the need for conversations in improving quality of care. So if you've been through the entire conference or just one session, you must have heard this and felt it in every session, beginning from the keynote by Sherry Sobrato, where she talked about enabling the young adults through graffiti through her app Shadow's Edge, to hands-on art, meditation, yoga, and cooking for your whole self, as well as the CEO conversations on creating a job title called Chief Art Officer, letting art be the glue in making conversations about inclusivity and diversity possible, as well as what Ying Lu, designer and entrepreneur, said about looking for the fun in functionality and bridging the gap between work and life through art. And how can we forget Miral Kotub's heart-wrenching video that purely depicted that art can take any form, whether it is technology, dance, music? Tell your story and share the light. Keep the conversation going and do not accept the status quo. I had opened this conference with a challenge to everyone to please keep this conversation going, to make a noise, to push for better care, to push for quality care, to celebrate being different, and also to acknowledge that pain is part of life, change is constant, and that we have to treat the whole person and not just the diagnosis. I have to say this out loud over and over because after creating and serving thousands of patient families, after providing emotional, psychosocial, and mental support through healing through art programs that are kit tested, caregiver, and nurse approved, we still get told that art is a nice to have, not a must have. I'm still amazed that a hospital might have one art therapist. I'm still amazed because there are almost 15,780 children between the ages of birth and 19 years who are diagnosed with cancer each year, and a hospital might have one or even half a creative art therapist. And that is why a program like ours is so important. By the way, I had said this in the beginning, and I'm going to repeat it again. Our programs are at big award-winning hospitals, but please let me share that we do not get any funding from the hospitals. Our programs are supported by individual donors like you, philanthropists, company matching, and grant. So, as I said before, please keep the conversation going and give us feedback. Tell us what we did right and how we can do better. And most importantly, we cannot do this alone. So thank you everyone for being here. And I know that all of you are here just as I am because I'm so excited to hear from Chip and from David Hornik. I'm not sure everyone needs an intro, but I would love to give an intro because I've been waiting to talk to Chip or at least hear from him. Chip Conley is a New York Times best-selling author. Chip Conley is the boutique hotel entrepreneur who helped Airbnb's founders turn their fast-growing tech startup into a global hospitality brand. Chip is the founder of Modern Elder Academy, where a new roadmap for midlife is offered at a beautiful oceanfront campus in Mexico. New York Times bestselling author Chip is the hospitality maverick who helped Airbnb's founders turn their fast-growing tech startup into a global hospitality brand. In Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder, he shares his unexpected journey at midlife, from CEO to intern, learning about technology as Airbnb's head of global hospitality and strategy, while also mentoring CEO Brian Chesky. Chip is the founder of the Modern Elder Academy, where a new roadmap for midlife is offered at a beautiful oceanfront campus in Baja, California. He serves on the board of Encore.org and the advocacy board for the Stanford Center for Longevity. Chip Conley, welcome to our conference and for being here to end our 4 days. Please, welcome. I think you're muted, Chip.
Oh, I
Yeah,
don't know.
now we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Well, your story, Purvi, is so profoundly moving that it I feel a little bit at a loss for words, to be quite frank. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a few thoughts on the process of becoming a modern elder, but actually, most importantly, the process of integrating art into our lives. And then I think David's going to ask me a few questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Let me start by saying I'm just honored to be asked to join you, especially on your last evening, and I'm so sorry for the fact that yesterday was the anniversary of your son's passing. And my relationship with art is sort of confusing. I grew up as a kid who just absolutely was an accomplishment junkie. It felt like from a very early age that while I loved my parents were both firstborn. I was a firstborn. They wanted me to become president of the United States. So there were a lot of high expectations of me. The one I had straight A's in junior high school and straight A's in high school. The one B I got between 7th and 12th grade, the singular B I got was in my art class. I got a B. I didn't get an A. My teacher was named Ada Wurst, Wurst, Wurst. And so for me, the idea of art was about like the thing you were worst at. And it was the thing that I wasn't very good at. And so there was an element for me that I shied away from art, even though I was a very creative person. I said to my parents when I was 12, Mom and Dad, I want to be a writer when I grow up. And my dad said to me, he sat me down and he said, Chip, writers are poor or psychotic, and most are both. And I just said, I don't even know what psychotic means, but it doesn't sound very good. So I spent my teen years and then going to Stanford University, then going to Stanford Business School straight from undergrad, doing everything I could to jump on the treadmill of accomplishment. I guess I called myself an accomplishment addict because my accomplishments actually gave me self-esteem. They gave me a sense that I was worthwhile. And art or writing or anything that was sort of a more creative endeavor. I was a creative kid and a creative young adult, but it didn't seem very practical. So, but here's the part that's interesting: is I went straight from Stanford University, an economics major, as an undergrad, into Stanford Business School. And during my senior year at Stanford undergrad, I was age 20 or 21 at the time. I started taking studio art classes. I had finished all of my required classes to be an economics major. I knew I was going to Stanford Business School straight in from undergrad. And it was during that second that my senior year of college that I actually got reacquainted with art. And I didn't feel like it was the worst. I felt like it was a thing that actually brought a spirit out in me that actually didn't have enough time to show itself most of the time. And then all of a sudden I was surrounded in business school with people who were just like me, type A, very achievement addict, accomplishment addict type folks. And I ended up taking a bunch of elective studio art classes while I was in business school. I went to work in New York for Morgan Stanley between my first and second year of business school, and I realized wearing pinstripes, or actually, what are these? These are what do you call these, David? You know what these
Suspenders?
are. This is like suspenders.
Suspended.
Wearing
Suspenders.
suspenders and chomping on cigars at age 22, trying to be like a big boy in the investment banking world wasn't for me. And so I graduated from business school and went to work in a job that paid me 1/3 what Morgan Stanley was going to pay me, working for a maverick commercial real estate developer in San Francisco, focused on art projects, focused on developing spaces that actually were focused on the art and design world. And then a couple of years later, I ended up starting my boutique hotel company called Joie de Vivre, which means joy of life, which over the next 24 years became the second largest boutique hotel company in the US. And we created 52 boutique hotels, really dedicated to art and design and creativity and beauty and aesthetics. A couple last thoughts, and then let me just sort of try to sort of summarize some of my experience on this, is that one of the things that started to become clear to me is that it was when I felt in the flow of being creative, whether it was writing, doing photography, actually painting or drawing in an art class. It was during those times that something came out in me that felt fully integrated. My life prior to my early 20s was very much a life that was striving, that was focused on being the best, being successful, feeling a sense of self-esteem from my accomplishments. But it was when I was actually in the act of creativity and curiosity, where I didn't really care about the end result of the writing I was doing, if I was journaling, or the photographs I was taking because I wasn't necessarily going to show them to anybody, or the painting I was making, that I felt a certain liberation to really be who I was. And one of the things I've learned over the past few years, since leaving my full-time role at Airbnb, helping the three founders steer the rocket ship for a bunch of years during the very dynamic growth years of Airbnb's, is since starting the Modern Elder Academy, we have an arts therapist on staff. We've had 750 alums from 24 countries, average age 54, come and join us in Southern Baja, as Purvi said, on our beachfront campus. And what's been fascinating is how many people in midlife so desperately want to get back to that state of being creative, in that flow of being artistic, even when they feel like they don't have that capacity because maybe they got a B in art in 7th grade like I did. But what I think has been fascinating is to see that one of the real joys of getting older is to integrate all of who you are into one solid holistic package. And there's lots of social science research on this that now shows that as we get older, if we're healthy in our aging, we become more holistic, more integrated, more integrity. The word integrity comes from the process of integrating. That process means that we weave into our lives every component of who we are, our spirituality, our creative spirit, our ability to connect socially with others, our ability to be in solitude with ourselves. I was fortunate a few years ago to be one of the founding board members of the Burning Man project. So for those of you who don't know Burning Man, where the heck have you been?
Yes.
It's very well-known arts festival, in arts and spirituality festival in the Nevada desert that normally would have happened earlier this month, but actually was online this year. And I have to say that joining, and I was also on the board of the San Francisco Art Institute and the San Francisco Open Studios, which is where artists open up their studios for a weekend. All of these arts organizations, and as a founding board member of the San Francisco Center for the Arts at Yerba Buena, all of these art organizations are dedicated to helping people integrate. And what I love about your story, Purvi, is the more we help children to learn that earlier in life, the more they have integrity with who they are at an earlier age. And it is that integrity, it's that process of weaving together who you are, finding the awe and wonder in life, which is what art does for us. The things that we need in life often are awe and wonder. And you don't just find it at Disneyland. You can find it on your own, with your own journey. And so each of these organizations that I've had some involvement in, when I look back at what those organizations are doing, they're less about producing a product, which is what I've spent most of my life doing. And they're more about creating a process for integration, for people to really feel who they are and the pulse of their life force within them in that creative process. So I'll just finish by saying I've been fortunate to, while scared of art at a young age, to embrace it in my 20s and to see that, in fact, the process of embracing art and design and aesthetics led me to creating a company, a boutique hotel company that was dedicated to creating habitats for people to feel the aesthetics renewed them, whether it was the art or the design or the joie de vivre, the joy of life that we tried to produce and create. And I think the more we offer this to children, especially children who are in need and have health crises, the more we are going to create a collection of young, integrated human beings who, whether they're still on this planet or not, leave a legacy behind them that, frankly, at times, all of us who are older can learn from. So those are my thoughts, and I'm going to pass it on to David now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sure we're going to talk more about this, but David, I have to still introduce you, so please don't talk yet. David Hornik is general partner with August Capital. He invests broadly in information technology companies with a focus on consumer-facing software and services, enterprise applications, and infrastructure software. Hornik is an eclectic technology background. At Stanford, he studied and taught the impact of technology on music, earning a degree in computer music with honors. At Cambridge, England, he explored the power of technology in tracking and combating bias crime, receiving an MPhil in criminology at Harvard Law School, from which he received a JD magna cum laude. David focused upon convergence of technology and the law, serving as an editor of the Harvard Journal of Law and Technology and publishing papers on digital audio and software piracy. One thing that your bio does not say is that you're an avid art collector, you love art, and that you and your wife create these amazing 2-minute art tours with your dog, Teddy. So welcome, David.
Thank you. Yeah, that... I don't know where that bio came from, but it felt very formal. Purvi, are you able to put me and Chip side by side? I don't need any I don't need to say much of anything, particularly when sitting alongside someone as amazing as Chip Conley.
Wow.
I Chip, it's interesting to hear you talk about the quest for perfection and your march towards Stanford. And I guess I'll start with, have you reached out to Ada? Has she? I mean, I hope she's followed.
Ada worst. I have no idea. Seventh grade class. I don't think I ever saw her again after ninth grade, which is when our junior high school ended. And I have written about her before in some of my books. I've written 5 books, and she's come up before. But yeah, she had a profound impact. The other thing I actually learned from that 7th grade class was that I was colorblind, which men are 5 times more likely to be colorblind, and I was colorblind. And so I ultimately said to Ada when she gave me my B, I said, you know what? I think my colorblindness is why I got my B. I think you should make it an A. And she said, Chip, I think you're color dumb. And she was joking, but I took it like, okay, I get it. But I have loved colors ever since.
Well, I was a dyslexic kid, so I didn't have, it was a little easier for me to accept, to a certain extent, imperfection. But I have to say that I had this English teacher my freshman year of high school who did say at some point, maybe David, you don't belong in accelerated English. And that was like, oh no, Gloria Conifal, I will never forget your name. I will never forget that you said these things to me. Yeah. Now, in all fairness, it turns out being a dyslexic kid, English is pretty challenging, but but I powered through law school, so there's something for that. But so I went to Stanford as well, and Stanford is obviously Stanford's a pretty amazing place, and there are lots of opportunities. And I ended up, as you heard, with a degree in computer music, which was music technology and music history. And it's, I was in love with music. But the interesting thing, again, about this question of embracing art despite its challenges, I got to Stanford and I had every expectation that I would be in the orchestra. I was this violinist. It's what I had done for years, right? Studied for a dozen years by the time I'd gotten to Stanford, and auditioned for the orchestra and didn't get in. And I was like, wow, it turns out being a good violinist, an arguably great violinist in the state of New Hampshire is like being a shitty violinist in the state of New York. So, but it gave me this opportunity to rethink, like, okay, what are the opportunities here? What are the things that I get to embrace? And so it was embrace technology and play in pit orchestras and do these other things. And one of the things that I had the fun of embracing, as you say, was studio art. One of my favorite classes by far was sculpting the figure, which, I took with a friend because it seemed like it would be a great, fun, engaging experience. And to this day, I can picture myself sitting in the studio with just clay in your hands creating, right? There's something about it that is really powerful. And as Purvi said, I've come back around, not as a creator by any stretch of the imagination, but as an appreciator and a lover and someone who understands that art is about emotion, right? That art is this emotional connection that's so powerful.
It's emotion, and it's also it's nonlinear. And if you spent your life being pretty linear, and of course if you're a computer comp sci major focusing on music, you have a nice mixture of lyrical and logical at the same time. But what art can do is to help your synapses of your brain see things and make connections that you might not have seen otherwise. And I think that's one of the beauties I suggest sometimes entrepreneurs to just go to an art museum or go to a zoo and go and walk in nature, take photos of things that metaphorically speak to you, because that process of being nonlinear in your thinking may open doors to solutions or to emotions that you might not have experienced otherwise.
So you create, in some ways you created the bespoke hotel business in the US, right? You created this
Well,
idea that
there are a few of us, but
all right, you were among
Bill Kimpton deserves credit, so does Ian Schrager. But the three of us probably are the best known.
And obviously it turned out to be a very good business, but when you approached it, it seems to me, just what you said there, and as I see you sitting there out in the world, it was about experience, right? It wasn't that it was about creating the most economic hotel in the world, but about creating an experience. And how did you think at the time? Did you think that was a little business, but was going to create a lot of joy? Or did you see it as a way to really differentiate what you were doing?
I mean, I think on some level, just quite practically, I was a 25-year-old living in San Francisco with a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the Filbert Steps that was spectacularly beautiful. But I had all these friends from college and business school coming and staying with me who didn't live in San Francisco, and they all slept on my couch. And so I started doing focus groups one-on-one with them, like, why are you not staying in a hotel? And what I kept hearing was that hotels in San Francisco were expensive and boring. And so I guess I decided I wanted to create a hotel that was not expensive and not boring. And as I did a little bit of research, being a very young real estate developer at that time, I started looking at the hospitality business, saw that it has a great upside if you do it well, but also saw that the boutique hotels were the antidote to commoditization of the business. Basically, the hotel chains, Marriott, Holiday Inn, Hilton, had gotten to a place where they thought that all people wanted as a customer, as a hotel guest, was no surprises. That's right, just generic. Like the Holiday Inn in Dallas should be just like the one in Detroit. It's like, well, no, of course not. Like each community should have its own hotels. If you look at the history of hotels, they were not about commoditization. They were about sort of being the pillar of the community, of the soul of the community, and lots and lots of community events happened in that hotel. So I started it because I had people staying on my couch, and I called it Joie de Vivre, the actual umbrella name for the brand, because I wanted to create joy. That was really at the core of what I thought we were in the business to do. If we help people be joyful, we would be successful as a business. I really didn't have any idea we would grow to having 52 boutique hotels over the course of the next 24 years. And I can't say that even though I went to Stanford Business School, that I'd created a very comprehensive business plan that showed that why logically joy was our strategic differentiator, nor why me, as a guy who was 25 or 26 when I started the company, tapped into my creativity and aesthetics to have it become a strategic differentiator. To be able to know that, wow, boutique hotels do well partly because of their aesthetics, because of their art, because of their creativity and their design. And so in some ways, that scary part of art and design for me became something I started to own as a talent, and then connect with other great designers and artists in a way that created a very successful company, with art and design as a foundational part of it.
And how did that relate to service and then to experience, right? I think today we look and certainly, we can chat a bit about your Airbnb world, but this universe of experience, as opposed to simply the I get in a room and it embraces me because it's a particular look or feel. So did those things all come together at the same time? And
there was, it was in the late 90s. So I started my company in 1987, but in the late 90s, something called the experience economy started getting some attention. And a couple of friends of mine who wrote the book, The Experience Economy, really helped craft this idea for me that we were already doing. From the very start, it was not just about art and design and beautiful things, because quite frankly, there were some boutique hoteliers who were wannabe designers. And so their whole idea of what a boutique hotel is it needed to be really sexy and beautiful design, and then it had to have a velvet rope so that only certain people could get inside. we wanted to be the opposite. We were sort of like, democracy in the hotel business, and very affordable hotels, and hotels where every room was dedicated to a different artist, young artist, and hotels like that. But I think the part that set us apart versus some of the other boutique hoteliers was this element of, we were in the business of just creating friends. We called our Airbnb, called our hotel employees at the front desk hosts. At the very start, 34 years ago, the front desk clerks in a hotel, in our hotels, were called hosts, which is why when, many, many years later, 26 years later, the Airbnb founders approached me about, being in charge of all the Airbnb hosts around the world, which at that point there weren't that many, but there were a lot. I mean, we were in 170 countries when I joined. And we grew that to about 192 countries. But we were 1/25th the size we are today when I joined. So it was small, but compared to what it is today, but it was still a global company. But the company had no sense at all of how to build the experience and help teach the hosts how to deliver that experience, and how to be a host. And so that was one of many things that I had to do in the company, is to take that idea that I learned as a boutique hotelier about the differentiator really being the intangible of experience, not service. Because service is when something does something for you, but it feels very formal. But hospitality is when it comes from the heart. It doesn't come from an operating manual. And so how do you deliver that across the world, for people who are not even your employees? That was a challenge. And I'm proud that Airbnb has been a disruptor and a controversial company on many levels. But one of the things I am proud of is that when I joined the company, our guest satisfaction scores weren't great. They were okay. And then when I left 4 years later, and now have spent 4 years as a strategic advisor, our actually guest satisfaction scores were significantly higher than the hotel industry. Now that's bizarre. Like, how could you? Because of course we've all seen the headlines about bad things that happened in Airbnb listings or homes or apartments. And of course, the reality is there are bad experiences that you can have. But what was phenomenal is how, when you unleash the creativity while also providing the tools for a micro entrepreneur who has one home or a cottage in the backyard to open their doors to people from around the world, magic can happen. And I really feel very appreciative of the fact that I was part of the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, helping to figure out how to help make that magic happen.
Well, one of the things you get used to, but don't really, in the venture business, in the venture capital business, which is my business, is when you get it wrong. And we got it wrong with Airbnb. We turned down the very first institutional investment in Airbnb. And interestingly, or not interestingly, it was because of those bad experiences that we were worried about, because they felt very risky in a universe that was about uniformity and it was about service. And so if suddenly you have this variety of experiences and the only thing you equate outliers with is negativity, then you get to the wrong answer, which is what we did, to say, oh, that's a risky investment.
You're not the only one, David. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who turned down Airbnb, and when they approached me to join them, I said, "Are you sure this is a good idea? This business?" Because it didn't make sense to me as a hotelier. I had been a sort of rebel pioneer as a 26-year-old starting my company, but now I was 52. And here are these 26-year-olds who started their company. I was like, I was now the establishment, not having a clue how this business model makes sense. Fortunately, I said yes, and I dove in. And but you don't feel badly, David.
Oh no, I will. Yes, I will. Now, interestingly, we ended up going on to fund a company called HipCamp, and HipCamp is an experience business, and it's about allowing people to make available their mountainside and their yurt and their their outdoor experiences. And it's interesting, and I'm curious how you think about this, particularly given the Modern Elder Academy, this beauty and art and beauty and environment and all of that, how those things come together. In Hip Camp, it's about the external experience. It's not this designed experience. And it seems to me that, at least in your current MEA location, you're really bringing together natural beauty as well as design, etc. How do you think about those things and how they work together?
So, and for those who don't know it, let me just give a minute on, or 30 seconds on MEA, Modern Elder Academy. It based upon my experience at Airbnb, where they called me the Modern Elder of all things. And they said, Chip, we love you because you're as curious as you are wise. And a modern elder's curious. And so I left Airbnb, wrote this book, Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder. And while I was writing that book in Baja, where I have a home on the beach, I had this epiphany one day, which was, why do we not have schools, tools, or rites of passage for people in midlife to repurpose themselves? So, that was almost 3 years ago that we opened. And, as I said, we've had 750 alums now from 24 countries. What we do is we create an experience that is meant to transform someone. Now that sounds like that's a big standard. Transformation is not something that most people would expect in a week. But we have the raw materials of people who are often going through transition. One of the things that we don't know as a society is that most people don't know is that the predominant number of transitions you may have in your life happen in midlife. And there's a new concept, a life stage called midolescence, sort of like adolescence. Adolescence, you go through a lot of transitions, emotional, hormonally, etc. Midolescence, in your late 40s and 50s, you go through a lot of emotional, hormonal, and other changes. And yet we have very little in the way of rites of passage. So to create a rite of passage for 18 people in a 1-week workshop together, very diverse group, because the majority of people are on some form of scholarship we give them, it means that we better actually create an experience that is going to take them out of their comfort zone and put them in a place where they're going to actually, in that nonlinear way, see how things connect. What is the mastery they've created in their life? So let me use an experiential, something we do that's a good example of how we use nature as art, nature as metaphor. So if anybody's ever gone for a hike in the mountains or somewhere like that, you see sometimes people use rocks as art. And sometimes it's way too much, like 25 rocks piled up on the top of each other. But there's a real art to rock balancing. And what we started to see is the metaphor of what we call mentoring stones. The process of actually taking a large vertical rock, large meaning like maybe like that, on a beach, and then having an underlying rock that's bigger below it. If you want to actually stand that rock up, what you have to do is have presence in moving that rock or that stone around. In the process of moving it around, you start to develop a little divot in the base of the rock, which you don't even know. And all of a sudden you hear a click and you take your hands away, and that stone is standing up inexplicably, because it's often vertical. It doesn't look like it could stand up on its own. That is mentoring. The process of mentoring someone younger than you is the process of having presence. It's the process of working with them, developing that divot that creates a base for them to click. Take the hands away, they're standing up. So to be able to use nature as an artistic teacher and for metaphor of understanding our lives is spectacular. There's a guy named Andy Goldsworthy, famous artist who used nature as art, and we really subscribe to his not just the aesthetic of his art, but the metaphor of his art. Just a quick other example is there's hundreds of pieces of driftwood on the beach, and one of the things that is true of us in life is we are liminal when we're going through transitions. To be liminal means you're in between two things. When you're going from adolescence to adulthood, you're in a transition, a transition or a liminal phase. When you're going from adulthood to elderhood, which just happens often in your, for me, I was 52 and the average age at Airbnb was 26, so I was an elder. That process requires you to be liminal, which is often a period of transition and awkwardness. So we take this driftwood and we put the driftwood, take our group of 18 or 20 people, put about, I don't know, maybe 150 pieces of driftwood standing up along a beach, and we put it right at the tide line, so that it's typically not high tide when we're doing this, so that actually at high tide, those vertical driftwood sticking in the sand are both in the ocean and on the beach at the same time. When the waves come in, they're in the ocean. When the wave goes out at high tide, they're on the beach. And what we see over time is the driftwood some of the driftwood falls over. And that is part of life. And the process of actually seeing that the tides that we have on a daily basis are a metaphor for understanding transitions in our lives, and the fact that sometimes things actually are supposed to fall down, and they're even more beautiful when they do, is the process of not having to be perfect. And so, I could go on for hours about this. I'll shut up. But what I can say is that to actually create an experience where people can see that nature can be your ultimate teacher has been a beautiful opportunity in my life, to see that experience design can be a form of an art as well.
I'm a huge Andy Goldsworthy fan. I think his work just it's so simple and beautiful. And there are a number of videos, and if you haven't seen Andy Goldsworthy's work, look him up. But there was this wonderful video of Andy working using sticks to build this very intricate and complicated but beautiful mesh. And he said it was about the process and the balance and pushing the outer limits to say, like, I can make this, feels impossible, but it's possible, except that sometimes it isn't. And in this particular video, it gets to that last piece, and then the entire thing falls apart. And he says, like, well, that 100 hours.
Yeah, no, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for just saying you throw your love into something, and you can't control it sometimes. Yeah. Whether this is your children or a startup that just doesn't quite make it, or a piece of art that doesn't quite make it.
But it does, but it's process, and I think Purvi, has talked about this and knows this, that the process, as you saw it at Stanford and then into business school. I wish I had the good sense to take art classes while I was in law school. It would have given me unbelievable balance. It would have given me a lot more connectivity, and I didn't have any of that in law school. And so, Kids and Art is so much about bringing this connectivity and the process and and some predictability and all of those pieces together to allow you to exhale, right? As a parent, as a kid who's going through something so hard and challenging. And it seems like, you understand this, embrace this. I was looking over your MEA website, and you have art studios in the space. And so do you experience that? If you talk about this, this transition period for adults as they're making their way to next stage, do you find that the art has that capacity to calm and to steady and to allow people to not think about the pain that they're in and allow them to connect with their inner selves in ways that I think Purvi saw with Kids and Art?
Yes, there's no doubt about that. We have an art therapist, and she's spectacular, and she's on staff. She's lives in the neighborhood, and what I think one of the things that we all, whether it's art or it's improv, we give people the opportunity to improv. Baking bread, which is a form of art in collaboration. I'm scared of that. The idea of I'm not very good in the kitchen. Learning how to surf, writing poetry, journaling, trying yoga. Life is really, an adventure or nothing at all. That's what Helen Keller said. And she was basically, she was not an artist, but she used her life as a form of art. And what we really try to do is help people move out of a fixed mindset. So Carol Dweck from Stanford quite famously wrote a book called Mindset, where she said that if you have a fixed mindset, you're trying to prove yourself, and you tend to what you define success as winning. But over time, as you get older, there are fewer things you can win at. So you start actually, your sandbox gets smaller and smaller, because if you're only going to play the games you can win, you don't play a lot of games. The opposite of a fixed mindset is a growth mindset. And instead of trying to prove yourself, you're trying to improve yourself. And instead of trying to win, you're trying to learn. If we can help people at any age move from that fixed mindset to that growth mindset in whatever part of your life, you could be a fixed mindset in your religious life and a growth mindset in your career or in your family or in your romance, whatever. But if you can help people move to the growth mindset, you help people to move to a place where they're less judgmental of themselves. They're more open to new experiences, and they're more open to the epiphanies and serendipity of what happens when you put paintbrush to paper or pencil to paper or thought to beauty, of watching a whale breach off the shore, or watching a little sea turtle hatch on the beach in front of us and make its way, just improbably to the ocean to try to live its life. So it's that process of seeing that there is a bigger world than what's between your two ears for you to learn from, and to recognize that you are not the center of the universe. It doesn't all revolve around you. These are the kinds of lessons and that element of a growth mindset that help us to get to a place in life of realizing, my gosh, my process of getting older is a process of opening up to possibilities. And that is not the way we as a society tend to think of aging.
Yeah. If anyone has any questions for Chip, I'm happy to pass them on. Just type them in there. We'd be thrilled to jump into them and get to those. So please let us know if you have questions.
I see one question for Chip, and the question is, how did you select artwork in your hotels?
Are you an art consultant? I used to get a lot of art consultants.
That question was from my brother, so.
Okay. You know what? So each hotel had its own theme. So we were very strange. I mean, that's a great question, because it opens up a fact that I think that David will appreciate. So I started with one hotel. It was called the Phoenix. I still own it. It's in the Tenderloin of San Francisco. It became a rock and roll hotel. Every room was dedicated to a different San Francisco Art Institute student's work. It was funky and irreverent as a hotel. And then over the course of 52 hotels, every single hotel had its own name, its own identity, its own personality. Every hotel was its own piece of art. Mm-hmm. Pablo Picasso did not go and use a Xerox copier to make his art. Each one was its own thing. And so that's how we looked at it. So the art we might choose, so that was more speaking figuratively. Literally, the art we would choose in the hotel would relate to the personality of that hotel. Mm-hmm. So at the Hotel Rex, which doesn't exist anymore in San Francisco, but which existed for about 20 years, it was about being a sort of literate, intellectual hotel. So the art had a bit of an intellectual element to it. At the Hotel Vitale on the waterfront, it was it was all about vitality and nature, the spaciousness of nature. So it wasn't even, we didn't even have a ton of art in that hotel. What was the art was really the surfaces, the materials, the stone, the polished granite, the wood, and so it was almost like nature was the art. The art was really nature as the ultimate form of art. So that's how we did it. I don't think we ever hired an art consultant the whole time. We did have our own in-house design staff that allowed us to create our own form of interior design for our hotels. And we didn't. So in some, we didn't stamp them out. Kimpton, I love them. They were the biggest boutique hotel company in the United States, but they ultimately started stamping out Palomars and Monacos. Ian Schrager was all about, a hotel like a nightclub, and it was, the Delano and the Mondrian. So what was different about us is that we didn't take a hotel like the Phoenix or the Vitale, two very different properties, and we didn't sort of say, okay, let's create 5 more of those. We just never did that. And I think that in some ways, without being too self-congratulatory, I think that is evidence that for us, the process of creating the hotel was the artwork, and the process was the beauty of it. It was not about saying, oh, that's successful now, let's replicate it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's great.
We have another question. It is beautiful to hear both of your experience and your appreciation of the value of art while you are both in the industry of business and venture. Having mentored and worked with founders and startups for so many years, have you thought about bringing more art and creative education to founders and business people to enrich and enhance their lives?
I want to tell a quick story on this, and then I'll let David has spent more time with founders than I have. But it was 2013 that I joined Airbnb, early 2013. And I was not only the head of global hospitality and strategy and overseeing 6 or 7 different parts of the business, but my job was to be the in-house mentor for this young CEO and co-founder, Brian Chesky. And what I learned very quickly was that I was the in-house mentor for Brian, but we mutually mentored each other. I called this I was a mentern. I was a mentor and an intern at the same time because I was learning as much from Brian as he was from me. So later in the year, after I'd been there for a few months, I said, Brian, you got to come to Burning Man. You went to design school. You went to RISD, Rhode Island School of Design. You got to come to Burning Man. I have a lot of history at Burning Man. You will really appreciate it. And at Brian, the good news is Brian was a very creative, CEO. So he came to Burning Man, and Brian said to me, Chip, Burning Man is like how the world would be if artists ruled the world. So I will just tell you that story reinforced something that I think Brian has tried to live up to as Airbnb is a much larger company now. And I'm very proud of my mentorship with him because he's had to go through a very hard time, is that he realized the value of art, the value of art as a part of life, not as the icing on the cake. It's foundational to the ingredients of what's in the cake. It's not just this thing you sort of add on as the embellishment.
Yeah.
David, do you want to add something?
Sure. I started a tech conference 13 years ago. I was going to all these tech conferences, and there were some amazing things. I've been going to TED for many years and all things digital, etc. But I really wanted to create an event that was about the experience. I wanted it to be, there were no speakers, there were no panels. It was the conversations that I was having at all of these other conferences in the lobby. And so I literally called it the lobby. And so the lobby conference started. It was, invite only, a bunch of amazing people, off the record. And it has evolved over the last 13 years. And I now think of it like experiential theater. I want people to show up. I want them to have this holistic experience. And it's very much about making sure that this is not a technology, that this isn't a business conference. So when there's a theme and you show up, but the first thing that happens is I show up in a costume. And the reason that happened is that the very first year I had it in Hawaii, and I had this event, and I got the 150 people to come to Hawaii to talk about technology. And I thought, this is Fantasy Island. And those of you who are of our approximate age, Fantasy Island was this experience where you showed up in this island and there were these two characters. And I'm this rather Lilliputian man. I'm a 5'4" character. And I just thought of myself as the Hervé Villechaize character in Fantasy Island. And so I started my conference in a white tuxedo with my tallest friend next to me. And I said, welcome to Fantasy Island. And it struck me that this idea of getting business people out of their world and to do more creative things was hugely important, and it was valuable to them. And so now the conference, Chip referenced doing improv. Well, I've had amazing improv instructors from Second City come and teach this idea of yes and, I will always say yes to everything you say. I think that's invaluable. We had an art focused one, and you could learn art history, you could do painting. We had a film based conference, and you could either learn sword fighting, or you could learn. And so yes, you take these people who are by their nature very, focused on getting stuff done, etc., and you say to them, look, this is about relationships. This is about experiences. This is about supporting each other, and they leave much better people. They leave close to everyone who's come to the event. They leave really excited about engaging in the world and with each other in a deeper way. And it's very much like the creation of art. Like, my folks, maybe they're sword fighting, but maybe they're finger painting, right? And that thing, I think, is so valuable. And so, this conference sells out instantaneously because people are very excited to engage with this amazing group of people. Mm-hmm. It's fun.
So I oops, there's echo. Are you guys hearing?
We can hear you.
Okay. So I have a question that I think I've asked David before, and you're hearing echo, I hear.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a little echo. Yeah.
No idea why. I'll try one more time. If it doesn't work, I will. Yeah, everyone's saying there's echo. I'll just type it otherwise.
We can hear you. This is great.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you bridge the divide between the for-profit world and the non-profit world?
You have businesses that fail. I'm kidding. I think it's a really important question because what I've really seen over the course of ever since I graduated from business school, 1984, is there used to be a perspective that the for-profit world goes and solves consumer problems, and the for-profit world does that, solves consumer problems, and the nonprofit world solves society problems. And I actually think that over the course of 36 years since I graduated, is that there's more of a merger of these two. I think there are a lot of for-profit businesses run by social entrepreneurs that have a deep, strong mission that may actually not be so profit-oriented. And there may be actually nonprofits that have created business models that are so successful in trying to solve a society problem that actually they're solving individual problems as well. I think the number one thing we could use is more integration of for-profit and nonprofit leaders learning from each other, because I actually think it's it's just like I learned from Brian, mutual mentorship, 1 + 1 = 3. I think that would be the same, is you help for-profit and nonprofit leaders learn from each other, because we live in a world where there's more of a hybrid of the intention of those organizations than there used to be.
I guess the reason I brought it up, and I want you to say something too, David, is because one of our sessions was about CEOs at Crossroads and social impact, and this conversation had come up about, is it possible, just like our whole conference is focused on the whole child in treatment and not just the diagnosis, is it possible for industry to not make this purpose an afterthought?
Yeah. Well, look, it certainly is possible, right? And Chip got it right. Ultimately, I think that increasingly there is a community of creators, whether they're engineers or marketers or young people who are coming to work today who do not want to work in places that don't have a purpose, Right. And Airbnb did a great job, and I'm sure that Chip was involved in that, and I'm sure that Brian was involved in that dramatically. But, in saying, look, we're doing something here that empowers you as an owner, as an experience creator to connect with other people, right? When we were pitched on the Airbnb story, it was, there are people all around the world who would be thrilled to invite you in their home and show you around their neighborhood. Right?
Yeah.
It wasn't, we can get you a better deal on a hotel room. That was never it. And then Chip doubled down on that and said, that's right. Like, this is why it's different. Why do you go to the Phoenix instead of the Hyatt? Why do you go, to these great hotels instead of these cookie cutter hotels? And Airbnb was, and so there was a universe of folks who said, oh, I want that to be my mission, right? I want that. And I think that there are companies, we certainly back companies who say, we are here to do something great. I funded these two amazing young women entrepreneurs who wanted to create a better baby food. It's a company called Yumi, and it's a subscription baby food company, but it was a mission-based company because they said, we've done all the research, we have these babies, and the nutrition and health of our babies in these first days of their lives really dictates so much. We need to change the world of baby food. Oh, that's amazing. So you don't join that company, I want to code a new website. You join that company because you want healthy babies, right? So I think that business has the opportunity to be about healthy babies, to be about, about showing people your world. How about opening up your world to people? That's what Airbnb is. It's not about like, here's a couch. This is why I think San Francisco is amazing, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm absolutely, and by the way, people work harder when they care about it. They do better when they care about it. They just, that is, we know that to be true. So yeah, you can bridge this gap. And the cynicism of Silicon Valley that we hear about a lot, which is people come here to create things so that they can get rich. Those companies suck. And they fail, right? Those founders are bad at what they do. The ones like Brian who were in design school and have this idea and are driven, those companies become big and exciting.
And they survive pandemics, partly because truly purpose and meaning is what you hold on to as a life preserver when you're going through a difficult time.
So true.
Chip, I know you have to leave, but we have one more question.
Okay.
We have someone from RISD who says agreed. Being in San Francisco for the last 10 years and witnessing art funding are being cut off, more artists are moving out of SF, and more parents send their kids to computer programming class instead of art classes. What could venture and tech companies do to support the ecosystem at large?
That's a great question. I think the sad good news is hopefully rents are coming down in San Francisco, so maybe the artists will come back. But I think that, it's a very profound question for us at Airbnb because we are a company full of designers and lots of artists, and how do we create an ecosystem where art can flourish in a very expensive place and in a place that more and more seems to be focused on, results. So I actually think one of the ways to do that is let's introduce young, creative tech talent to young, in my definition of young, meaning people in their 20s, young adults who are successful entrepreneurs and business people in tech companies, to people in their teens who want to actually foment their artistic spirit. So one of the organizations that I used to be on the board of, as I think of all the organizations I've been on the board of, about half of them are arts organizations, was Youth Speaks. And I love Youth Speaks. Youth Speaks is all about spoken word poetry. And it is predominantly focused on urban youth, young teenage people of color who are getting in touch with their voice through poetry and spoken word. And we have woven Youth Speaks with Airbnb in a variety of different ways. And my friend Michael Franti, who's a famous musician now, who I like, someone I've been mentoring for 35 years, who's deeply close to me, he has also, as a musician, helped with Youth Speaks and Airbnb to integrate some of that. So I actually think it's just creating an ecosystem that's larger than we normally think, and take a 28-year-old designer who spent 4 years at Google and 2 years at Airbnb and connect them to a 15-year-old who they can mentor, and they can actually, again, get back to that place where, frankly, I bet the 28-year-old's can learn as much from the 15-year-old as vice versa. So helping, and this is one of the challenges with the politics of San Francisco today. When I say the politics, I mean just how people perceive the tech industry, is that they're in their own little bubble. They aren't integrating into the broader community as much as they could. There's also an organization called ROC, which is a spectacular organization, Visitation Valley, part of San Francisco, not a particularly prosperous part of San Francisco, and how we've integrated that youth program there with tech workers downtown has also been important, where it's not just mentors we're using there, but really role models. So I just think that's probably the number one thing I would focus on.
I would only add that, kids need to see examples of what it looks like to have been successful as an artist, as a musician, as someone who focused on some of these other things. And so we need the Brian Chesky's of this world to be celebrated. Look, he went to the Rhode Island School of Design. He did not go to Stanford to study economics. He wasn't a sellout like Chip. He was he was an artist, right? I mean, that's what we need. We need the kids to see that there are great jobs to be had, that there are great careers, that you can live a fulfilled, but also a comfortable and successful life, having come out of these things that you care about. And there's just so much pressure right now to say, like, oh, you could get a great paying job. And I always say, but will you be happy? And maybe the answer is we also have to remind kids that happiness is valuable, right? There's so little of that. Happiness counts. You're allowed to put that in the calculus,
There's so much social science evidence at this point that shows that happiness creates success. Success doesn't often create happiness. Just keep that in mind. Let's drill that into. I don't want to say drill, but let's introduce that concept to our young people.
Well, on that note, I know you have to go, and I really appreciate all of us, everyone at Kids and Art and all the attendees, everyone. We appreciate your taking the time to close out our 4-day session here. Thank you, Chip.
Purvi, thank you for all you do. You lead with your heart, and it is so evident, and you're a role model to us. And David, thank you. I just am honored to be with you, here, and I really appreciate what you and your company have done as a role model in the Valley. So,
thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Wow.
He's awesome.
I had told everyone at Kids and Art this could go on for 10 minutes or for an hour. So we have no idea. So Chip is well known to be, to be an innovator, but also to be a lovely human. And, you heard him use the word mentor many, many times. And, it's because people really look to him for guidance. And so it was great to have him here. Mm-hmm. I know that you are doing very well, Purvi, for someone who has been on for 4 days. No one is so crazy as to say,
well, we can't do this in person, this one night thing. So why don't we just do 4 days? We'll just have it go on for 4 days.
On and on, yes.
And the fact that you have 321 people who are currently on in this grand finale is a testimony to you and the connections you've made, and more importantly, to the organization you've built, right? To the impact it has, to the fact that it is a lifesaver when it can be a lifesaver. It is a life raft always. It is this powerful and important thing. And that it was born out of tragedy, and yet you have hung to it to say, I'm going to give other families the hope and the love that they need as they go through this. That is your gift. And I just think that, I'm so grateful to know you. I'm so grateful for everything you've done. And I can speak for these 321 people who are still, who are here and with you. They're here because of what this organization means to them, what it's meant to them, what it means to their kids. So thank you for that, because it's just such a powerful and important gift, and you deserve credit, but you also you share the credit. And so I just want to say, before we dive in further, I just want to stop and say, you're amazing, and this organization is amazing, and we all recognize that.
Thank you very much.
I don't even know that one needs to go much further. I mean, one thing we certainly need to do is say that this organization runs on the love and the support of all of you. Right? It runs on the sleepless nights of Purvi and the team.
So I have to interject that I was a crazy person to have the vision, but there are so many people behind who made it happen.
Of course.
So I will not take all the credit at all, because Jade Kwan, she jumped in. She was our very first volunteer. May I just tell everyone who's here, and they might not know, when I decided to go full-time in 2013, Jade was my very first volunteer, and she and I worked in this tiny office. And then, of course, life happened. She moved to New York, and she was moving to Hawaii, and I said, I need you. She was in transition. I'm like, I need you. I'm doing this event. And she was a community catalyst. She was the one who helped us bring people together. So she really helped take this vision and really make it happen. Ideas are cheap. You have to know how to execute them. So, and then I want to thank, I cannot just stop at Jade. I want to thank Sejal Desai, who is operations manager. Every email you've received is thanks to her. Every organized link and everything that you saw, it's all thanks to her. And then a board member, Kiran Chadda, she herself was a parent. That's how she joined Kids&Art when her son was going through treatment. And then she made the mistake of asking me, what can I do? And that was it. She's been with us for a very long time as a volunteer and now as a board member. And she takes care of all our event platform stuff. And then we have our 2 program managers, without whom Kids&Art is nothing. Rachel Hansman, she handles Stanford workshops, and then Caroline Robbins handles UCSF workshops. And they're also the ones that have organized all the art that you see, along with Bianca, our new artist board member, committee member. And she is the one who brought all the artists together, worked so hard to bring so many pieces of art together. And Vinay, of course, our social media manager. If you saw all the social media coming at you, that was Vinay. And then we had 2 volunteers who also took time. One was my son Arjun from RISD. He orchestrated things over here and made a session happen and all the backdoor things. And then Nishka, again, family of someone who's been through cancer, also organized a session. I know I'm missing someone, Mara, and my board, of course, without whom we wouldn't be here. So, but it takes a lot of people to do what we do. And everyone always says that, why didn't you just get volunteers? There's so many mothers who are not working. Hello, you live in San Francisco. How many people can afford not to work is one. And number two, it's like you cannot start an organization and hope that everything will work fine just on the backs of volunteers. Of course, we cannot do all the things we do without our volunteers, but it does take a very dedicated staff to run all the programs and the volunteers and the artists, and especially our artists. Means I want to thank each and every artist that always donates every year. And I'm sure you've heard this, David. Everyone says artists are so nice and they have so much empathy. Just go ask them, they will give you a piece of art, right? And that happens all the time for every fundraisers. And our artists do that all the time. But in our organization, my goal was that artists always get a stipend. Why should they have to pay the $20 for parking at CSF? And they're giving their time. So we try our level best to give back and be there, but all of this takes funds, which we don't get from our hospitals. So.
No, can you give a sense of the scale of impact? I mean, how many kids over the years have had the experience of art and livening their lives and families? Do you have a sense of that over time?
Over the years, it's many thousands for sure. Because even just we moved to our virtual workshops on Zoom from March, and we've worked with almost 350 children in the 25 weeks. And that's just that much. When we are in person, we are doing workshops every week at both the hospitals, as well as destination workshops, which is once a month, where kids can come to us because they're feeling better. And then we have a critical care and a young adult program. So we really touch thousands of children every year. So.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Well, it's amazing work, and it's made possible by the people on this video now. You see that green link at the bottom there that says donate to Kids&Art Foundation. Here's your chance to do it, to add some love and art and all of the amazingness that Purvi and team have brought to the world. So please do, this is, I know that this is a time when lots and lots of people are asking and there's a lot of needs, but these are kids and families who, their worlds are turned upside down, and Kids&Art really creates some normalcy and some security and some, and connectedness in ways that nothing else is in their lives. So Purvi, I can't thank you enough for what you've done here. And I know that your supporters are going to be incredibly generous because they know what you're doing is so important.
Thank you so much for being here, David. And thank you everyone for being here. I know it's almost 7, and last day we have Ben closing us out with music. Every night we have been very grateful. First night we had VR DJ from Tribe XR. Then we had DJ coming from Mumbai, India the next day. And then we had Robin Parrish from LA bringing in ecstatic dance and movement and steel drums. And today we are going to enjoy Ben. So stick around, stay here. I'm just going to transition everyone to the next session. And as David said, we have a lot of art. You can donate. And we do have, our board member just wrote that we have our impact report on our website that talks about numbers and impact and all the things that Kids&Art has been doing over the years. And we also want to thank David. Say hi to Pamela and Teddy. Thank you for highlighting our art in the video. And I think people are just saying thank you, and they are very happy that you were here. So thank you, everyone. Stay here, bring your favorite beverage, and let's party. So thank you, David.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Bianca Levan, and I'm chair of the Artist Committee for Kids&Art. If you liked the video that you just watched, please consider donating by visiting kidsandart.org/donate. Kids and Art is able to provide free workshops for pediatric cancer patients through donations like yours. Thank you.